Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is USAWatchdog.com and the weekly news wrap up, the WNW 423 for Friday, March 20th, 2020. I'm going to start off with some good news. So, first, the good news. Apparently, there is a peer-reviewed study in south of France that just happened. 40 people were involved. There's a 100% cure rate for the China virus. And they're using a couple of very old, tried and true drugs. One of them is hydroxy chloroquine. It is an anti-malaria drug, and also acetaminophen, which is the main ingredient in a Z-Pack. These drugs have been around for decades. They don't have to be combined. They're used with 40 people in this peer-reviewed study by a top medical doctor in the south of France, peer-reviewed 100% cure rate. There are some other drugs that they are experimenting with that looks like they're having very promising results. One of them is an anti-Ebola drug, a test drug that works really well on this, supposedly. Also using somebody's plasma who has recovered from the China virus. All that to say that, and yes, it is a China virus, and no, I'm not a racist. I'm not. And so, and the president announces, he's had a bunch of press conferences. He stood and delivered, folks. Announces chloroquine will be made available immediately, has shown very, very encouraging early results. He's telling the FDA to immediately cut red tape and regulations to get this stuff approved and out there ASAP. This Gregory Regano, who is a co-author of the study, says, "Listen, we have a rate right now that is an exponent of 10. You know, it's at 10 times an infection rate. It's high, and something needs to be done immediately. And listen, what really was done to begin with, the reason why we're not as bad off as Italy and Iran and other countries is that President Trump early on, last part of January, cut off air travel from China. And he, the failing mainstream media, the enemy of the people media, NBC News, was asking, why weren't you better prepared? And he says, listen, I was prepared, and I cut this off early. And now, of course, everybody's closing their borders. You know, Justin Trudeau and in Canada and Mexico is shutting their border. Everybody around the world is shutting their borders down. Trump did it within the first 10 days. And he said, Trump even said, he said, listen, you won't give me credit for this. You called me a racist for doing this, but there was 20,000 people a day coming from China. And I cut that off. He says, you wouldn't recognize the country if I hadn't cut that off early. And yet NBC and other people called him a racist. And even in the press conferences this week, one of them, did you think calling it the China virus is racist? This is why the mainstream media is dead. They hire imbeciles. Have a serious thing. They're going to try to paint him a racist and score some points in thought shaping. You're a racist for calling it the China virus. The virus came from China. That's what the president said. I'm not a racist. The virus came from China. And listen, not only did it come from China, but Senator Marco Rubio is on record as saying, listen, they strong-arm people not to shut down flights. There is no question, there is no dispute that this became a global pandemic because of how China handled this early on. They tried to silence people. They strong-armed people to not shut down flights coming from China. Italy has an awful infection rate. I mean, it's overwhelming the system, even though there is a cure. Or that we think there's a cure or a way to fight it. Still, the system gets overrun. And Rubio, clearly, there is no dispute that this became a global pandemic because of the way China handled it early on. Period. The end. It came from China. And the president is branding it that way. China tried to turn this around, say it came from the American military. The president addressed this in the news conference, saying, they tried to say this came from the U.S. military, and that's just not going to happen. Well, as long as I'm president, that's about a direct quote. They're not going to do that. This came from China. The president has done I think, a fantastic job. You won't get the mainstream press to say that. And the one thing he did early on, shut down air travelers from China. Shut it down. And listen, I don't believe a word China says. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I've been telling you this for how long? They're a totalitarian, dictator for life, a communist state. There are no rights. There are concentration camps. They persecute Christians and every other religion that's not, praying to the black hole of nothingness. They will disappear you in a heartbeat. And they did that to some of the doctors that warned about this early on in China. So the good news here is it looks to be peer-reviewed scientific treatments with common drugs that have been around for decades, chloroquine and azithromycin, used in this one study, and it looks like it's having a 100% cure rate. Now the bad news. Listen, the economic damage has been done. Mr. McConnell in the Senate is introducing this package with $2,400 checks for families and $500 for every kid. We have to do that. And let's just back up just a little bit. This just shows you how serious this is, right? Restaurants are shutting down, sporting events. I've been telling you about the awful news. Ford and Chevrolet this week have both stopped making vehicles. Just awful stuff going on. I talked to Egon von Grers, who runs Matterhorn Asset Management at goldswitzerland.com. He's going to be the guest for the early Sunday release. He says, I'm up in the Swiss Alps, and I am self-quarantining myself away from people. He doesn't have anything. He's just staying away from people, distancing, social distancing, that whole thing. And he's up in the Swiss Alps. And he says, I'm from a little town here, and everything's closed down except for the grocery stores. All these businesses are going to go bankrupt. You multiply that by businesses all over the globe. Restaurants are forced to do takeout only. Their business is all taking a hit. The big unemployment claims are coming. They were announcing it in my state here in North Carolina. It's going to bolt up next week, 18,000 just next week. People are lined up for it. Jobless claims, here we are, could top a record 1.5 million next week. Say economists. The coronavirus pandemic bring much of the everyday American life to a halt, could drive new applications for U.S. unemployment benefits to a record 1.5 million or more next week, economists warned on Thursday. The bankruptcies are going to be stunning, folks. Stunning. Even though they do have a cure. And listen, I want to come back to that. It looks like there is going to be a cure. But the damage will have been done. Now, is America going to come out of this faster? Yes, we are. It's going to come out of this faster. But the world's in trouble. Deutsche Bank is still under $6 a share. They're the world's most systemically dangerous bank. This is according to the IMF since 2016. This is what I think. And here we have Ray Dalio, who said cash was trash. This is just before the stock market peak and warned of a crash. Dalio says global economy could suffer $12 trillion in losses. $12 trillion in losses. That's a hit, folks. The bankruptcies are going to be stunning. Have you heard all the money that they want to put out to the hotel industry, to the airline industry, Boeing itself? Boeing needs $60 billion. Their share price was not that long ago, $400 a share. It's down to $100. We've been living in a Ponzi scheme. They've been able to extend the Ponzi scheme and make you think everything is just fine. And let me tell you when they really kicked it into high gear to extend the Ponzi. We almost had the global abyss of long-term capital management. It was a $4 trillion black hole in the world economy. They managed to pull that out. And then what we got out of that long-term capital management, had to do with Russia and their defaulting on debt. What we got out of that was the Graham-Bliley-Leach Act, signed into law by President Clinton in early 2000. And what that did was effectively remove the firewall between investment banks and commercial banks. The people that had deposits and CDs and people that were speculating in the markets. Used to be, hey, listen, if you made a bad bet before the 2000, the Graham-Bliley-Leach Act, hey, if you made a bad bet, you don't get insurance. You don't get FDIC. You don't get bailed out. You missed on the risk profile. You're fired and your company's under. Nope, not after the Graham Bly Leach Act. This is where they kicked it into high gear and invented too big to fail. It's like Goldman Sachs. Anybody have any branches? Can you walk into a branch and open up a checking account at Goldman Sachs? No, you can't. But yet they get FDIC insurance. Are you getting me here? And then in 2006, they stopped. They thought it would be a good idea because it was too expensive to stop, printing information on the M3 money supply. We don't need to know how much money we're printing. We don't need that now. And what did everybody do? We've been living a lie, folks. A lie's been going on for a long time. Remember I was telling you not long ago the pretending is ending? Well, the pretending has ended. We'll be down 35% in a few weeks in the stock market. And I keep telling you, oh, we're going to have a V-shaped recovery. We're going to have a U-shaped recovery. Really? We're going to have that? Really? No, we're not. No, we're not. No, the Ponzi's ending. This is a Ponzi. And I wrote down a few things of the signs of the Ponzi. One of them was, of course, the Graham Bly Leach Act. That was a sign of the Ponzi. Nobody thought that was a problem. Nobody thought that giving Goldman Sachs and everybody else in the investment world FDIC insurance, that was no problem. It's okay. They have intervention. We don't have a single honest market in this world. Not a single one. They have intervened and manipulated and rigged, criminally rigged Forex, LIBOR, gold, silver. The CTFC, the SEC did nothing. During the Madoff scam, it was reported that the people at the SEC, some people at the SEC were watching porn. They were too busy for the Madoff scam. And Madoff's major enabler was JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase paid $2.6 billion to, as USA Today said, to settle criminal and civil charges. Well, that's break all the laws you want, pay a fine. Settle criminal charges by just paying a fine. I bet you Bernie Madoff, I've said this before, and I'd love to have just paid a fine for ripping people off, just $60 billion, but he couldn't have done it without JP Morgan Chase. We blame the little guy, and yet the big bank was the enabler. We have fake markets. We've had fake markets, totally faked, intervened markets. We had QE1, QE2, Operation Twist. And now, as of September of 2019, we've had QE4, which they're not calling QE, but we're in this fantasy world that we can just print money and the markets always go up, But yet the market got into big trouble back in September. Something broke, and who knows what it is. Was it Boeing? Was it Deutsche Bank? Was it Commerce Bank? Was it JP Morgan? I mean, what broke? Don't know. $60 billion a month. Yawn. Let the partying continue. Let the Ponzi continue. The Ponzi's over, folks. Are we going to come back? Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're going to come back some. Are we going to come back ahead of other people? Yes, we're America. Yes, we should be optimistic. But this idea that free money for everybody and no money down housing and fraud at the closing table for the housing market and fraud with the reporting factors, at the CTFC and the rigging for gold and silver. I mean, now you got silver at around 11 or 12 bucks an ounce, and you can't buy it for less than 25. Total departure from the phony, fake pricing mechanisms. Total departure. Total. Gold is much of the same. In the 14s, and yet central banks are buying it like crazy, and a lot of people are getting a much higher commission what you're seeing in terms of the spot price in the high 14s. That's just the beginning. Have you seen the money they're going to print? $100 billion here, $200 billion there, $300 billion there for the hotels, for the restaurants, for the all the businesses that are affected, sporting events, tons of little small businesses, which is the heart and soul of America. Tons of businesses that need cash flow every couple of they can't stand having their cash cut off for 2 weeks. We're not over yet. There's a cure. There's some hope on the horizon, but the financial damage is done. And keep this in mind. It had started in September. I was raising Cain about this in September of 2019. I had Rob Kirby on to talk about this, saying, if it goes on for a couple of more weeks, we're in trouble. And sure enough, it's still going on. That was before the China virus. It was before all that. And then now this is happening, and they're coming up with $2,400 per family, and people losing their jobs en masse, and it could be millions of people thrown out of work. And are they going to be able to start all those businesses right back up? I don't think so. Okay, and now they're having shelter in place in the state of California. There's 40 million people there. It's the most populous state in the union. And how long is that going to go on for? And how many people are going to be bankrupted from that? It's all the things that I've been talking about the Ponzi of all this, the rigging, the lack of price discovery. Like, as I said, Forex and LIBOR and gold and silver and volume discounts at the CME group, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Volume discounts for central banks so they can manipulate the markets, because we can't have an honest market out there. And then can't forget the $21 trillion that everybody's ignoring, that Dr. Mark Skidmore came up with his team, and Catherine Austin Fitts has been touting over at Solari.com. $21 trillion of money missing from HUD and Department of Defense, which they used Office of Inspector General reports, OIG reports, to find it out. Then they come up with this crazy story about how they had to restate our earnings from 2017, 18, and 19. It was $95 trillion. Really, where's the paperwork on that? There's a press release because we want to make that $21 trillion look not important. As far as I'm concerned, it's stolen money. And then they made the accounting dark. Anything that you want to find out about, they can legally tell you, go pound sand, that's a national security issue. The pretending has ended. The Ponzi is over. It's over. And people are in denial. I'm watching financial TV. And they keep saying, be a long-term investor. It's going to be a V-shaped recovery. Really? V-shaped recovery? And the last time, 2008, 2009, we had a 5.25% federal funds rate, which they cut to zero. They've already at zero now. What happened when the Fed cut rates to zero? In a surprise rate cut, 2,900-point loss. The Ponzi's over. Everybody's like, we want our Ponzi to continue. We want stocks to go straight up. And it's not going to continue. It's not. We're having a paradigm change here. What did my friend and guest Bo Pony say? We're going to have a new era of time. His date is the 21st of April. He's a cycle guy. I say we're going to have a new paradigm. Wait until the damage trickles down into the bond market. I mean, we already have a situation where Martin Armstrong came on this channel right here and I said, why do you think they're, and I've said this before, I'm going to, at the risk of being repetitive, I'm going to say it again. So are they going crazy in the repo market up to more than $100 million some nights? They dump into the market. And last week or so, they pumped in another $1.5 trillion. Everybody yawned. And what happened? And so what would happen if they stopped the repo market? Would we have a daisy chain of defaults around the world? Martin Armstrong, yes, we would. I don't know how they could stop the coming carnage now with the shuttering of millions of businesses globally are taking a huge hit. Individuals being laid off, they're not going to pay their rent and their car payment, whatever. I don't know if this money, this $2,400 is going to be able to fix that or not. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of massive, total global default. We have a debt bubble. And what are they doing? Printing money to try to suspend the debt bubble a little longer. We have a massive debt bubble. As I said, Egon von Greyer's is going to be the early Sunday release guest, and he said something a while ago on one of his interviews. We have basically, if you add up all the federal, state, local, sovereign, global debt and the derivatives and all the money printed, we got about $2 quadrillion of complete total debt out there. $2 quadrillion. A trillion is 1,000 billion. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. We're not paying that off. We're not paying it off. This is the nightmare that Trump walked into. Now we have erased all the gains from when Trump got into office, but thank God we had gains to erase. Hillary would have tanked the economy immediately. So we also don't have a debt ceiling that expired. That's another thing. We're pretending that we could just keep doing this. Everybody's pretending that we're only gonna have a 30% drop, and then everything's gonna be back to normal. No, it's not. Please stop thinking that way. We're not going to go back to normal. We already had a problem before the China virus, and this is the accelerator, the thing that really kicked it into high gear. But we already had a problem, a huge problem that they were fighting quietly behind the scenes, or at least the mainstream media was covering up because they wouldn't report on all this massive movement in QE and taking over the repo market, which usually was banks to banks, and the banks stopped trusting the collateral. So the Federal Reserve had to step in and start buying the junk collateral again. They put in $500 billion in 3 months in 2019. That's the only reason why it didn't crash then. They put $500 billion in, pumped it in, took it onto their balance sheet. The Federal Reserve. That's a fact. That's not what I think. And that's why I've been covering I haven't been covering whether it's a bioweapon of the China virus or whether it was done on purpose or it's a deep state or listen, I don't know. But I do know the financial damage is severe. Even if they get everybody cured tomorrow, and they're not. I think there is a cure, so there's some good news. But the financial damage is, wow, brace for impact. 1 in 8 companies, Michael Pinto came on and surprise little fact. 15% of the companies are zombie companies. We're talking about big companies here. They have to keep rolling over debt. They have to rob Peter to pay Paul. They have no margins. How many of those companies are going to go under? Are they going to be able to bail out everything under the sun? Boeing needs $60 billion. Boeing, just one company. That's a national security issue, so they're going to get bailed out by those pensioners. I suspect they will not. $60 billion. They can't bail out everybody. They can't make $2 quadrillion in unpayable debt whole. They can't do it. It's like I keep hearing they, the mysterious they. They won't let Deutsche Bank go under. Well, they let Deutsche Bank go from $120 a share in 2007 to about $5.86. Okay, they let that happen. So they won't let that happen. Really, the mysterious they. We had Wells Fargo. I mean, nobody goes to jail, right? Wells Fargo, $3 billion, biggest fine ever by a bank for racketeering, fraud, for forgery, for ripping off their clients. They got a $3 billion fine. Oh, and guess what? They can expense that $3 billion fine against their $9 billion in profits. I mean, it's unbelievable. The pretending has ended. Before I'll tell you the pretending is ending, it has ended. That's why you're seeing these giant downward moves in the stock market. Could they have some up days? Yeah. But it took, in the Great Depression, it took, I think, 2.5 years to go from where it was down to a 90% loss. Could that speed of that trajectory change in the nanosecond computer age we live in? Yes. But at least take that. You can't have the phony accounting, the buybacks, the manipulation, the fraud. I mean, people have paid fines and have pled guilty to crimes for all these manipulations. All of them. There was a time where people thought, there's a conspiracy to keep the price of gold down, and you have a tinfoil hat mentality. No, stop it. No. It's I want you to change your mindset. The mainstream media they're back to the 2008 and 2009 mentality. Hey, they pulled it off. I'm surprised they pulled it off. They allowed the Ponzi. They continued the Ponzi for another 11 years. They continued it. That's unbelievable. The money printing, the fraud, the crime, the bond buying, the rip-offs, the lies. They continued it, and I think that has now ended. We're entering a new phase. So this idea that we're going to get right back to where we were. Hey, listen, the president's right. I'm not making fun of him. It's going to recover pretty fast, but not to where it was. We got the debt. Now there's an even bigger hole in everybody's balance sheet than the Fed was already fighting starting in September. And it's going to continue. I mean, you got the governor of California now shelter in place for how long is that going to last for? How much more of a big hole in the balance sheet is that going to blow through everybody? Aren't hotels, airlines, and restaurants a pretty big part of the economy? That stopped. Takeout. It's pathetic. How many waiters and waitresses do you need to hand a bag out for takeout? How many tips do you think those people are getting? I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the only stocks that are doing well are Walmart, Costco, and Target. Maybe CVS. It's the damage is done. And even though there is some good news, the damage is continuing to be done. And not just here, but overseas. I mean, keep your eye on Deutsche Bank. Now, it may not go first, but it's going to go. And the banking system can you imagine how many people are going to stop paying their mortgages? You can't have, and their car payments, of course, their student loans, and their credit cards, and everything. Can you imagine, everything? Can you imagine a couple of months of that would do? And isn't that kind of a cascading effect? And then they go back to work, and then how can they pay back all the other stuff when there are barely, 78% of people living paycheck to paycheck? How are they going to pay all the stuff they missed back with these checks from the government? What's that going to do to our deficit? What's that going to do to our currency? The damage is done, folks. They can't bail out all the money lost. They can't. It's not going to happen. And then after we get on the other side, are those people they're gonna have time to go to dancing and go to nightclubs and concerts and some basketball games and baseball games? You mean they're gonna have all this money all of a sudden after being out of work for a month or 2 months or never going back to work? Some of these businesses are gonna close. These restaurants, they're never gonna open back up again. Macy's, it was already in trouble. Sears already in trouble. All these stores have shut down. They've stopped selling. Amazon's hiring. Yay. So, and I don't want to sound alarmist, and I don't want to sound negative, but I want to be a realist here. The pretending has ended. We got a pretend fake economy, and everybody was just in love with the fake economy and what money printing, it's okay. Lying, cheating, rigging, criminal activity, holding the prices, it's okay. No, it's not okay. And the China virus is the catalyst. We are already in trouble. Something was going to pop the debt bubble. This is what this is. And the reset. People have asked me about the reset of the dollar. No, it's going to be a reset of debt, and it is going to be painful. It's going to be painful. One of the things that Egon von Greyer's great interview. You should watch it. Probably his best interview he's ever done. He's done some good ones. And he said, we're going to come back to morals. We're going to come back to simple things. We're going to come back to things. Our times are coming, right? I think we're going to come back to Christ. I think we're going to come back to God, come back to church, come back to, something other than the black hole of nothingness. This namaste. Yeah. Stupid stuff. And somebody told me, namaste. And I said, well, Jesus loves you. Oh, ew. Somebody told me that at a pet store. I was like, you're holding on to the black hole of nothingness. You try to hold on to the black hole of nothingness when things get rough. You don't pray to the black hole of nothingness. That said, I want you to be positive. I want you to be informed. I don't want you to be buying into this line on the financial media and all the others. Oh, we're going to have a V-shaped, U-shaped recovery. It's going to come right back. We printed, $29 trillion back in the 08 and 9 disaster. We cut rates from 5.25 down to 0. We don't have that now. That ain't going to happen. Global debt is an exponent of what it was. The bond market is going to crash hard. That's all there's to it. You saw the 10-year treasury go down to 3.33%. Now it's back up over 1. You get a rising interest rate scenario, real estate will crash. The bond market will crash. It'll make what happened in the stock market already look like a party. I want you to be informed. You know, I don't want you to play on the railroad tracks and have somebody tell you, oh, it's a nice man with a picnic basket. And it's a, 70,000-ton train doing 70 miles an hour and you're on the tracks. Get off the tracks. Wake up. Stop pretending. Stop pretending we can live with all this crime and all this fraud and all this lack of enforcement and lawlessness and have no downside. Please stop pretending that can be. Oh, it's been done. But it's not going to continue. And you wait until you start seeing the leaves of this onion, the skin of this onion being pulled back, and you start seeing all the crime that they've covered up, which I've tried to bring to you so you understand why you should be conservative and take some risk off the table. I was telling you that for months? To take a little risk off the table. Pay off your car. Pay off your house. Hey, I bet you if you're a restaurant, if you're a worker and you just lost your job, wouldn't you like to have your house paid for? Or maybe have your car paid for so somebody won't come in the middle of 4 o'clock in the morning and toot up to your car. I've seen this done. And they grab your car and they're gone in 25 seconds. I just want you to have a clear picture of what's going on. That's all. And I also want you to be informed and not be fearful. Please don't be fearful. And that's why I always say, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, are firmly in control. I want to thank you for your comments on usawatchdog.com and all the YouTube channel. I want to thank you for your donations. That does help us out. And I want to thank you so much for supporting usawatchdog.com and believing in the work we do here. Thank you very much for your viewership and your support. And again, remember, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. This is good enough to say twice, right? God the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, are firmly in control.